Welcome to Startup Grind Las Vegas and the very first Startup Grind at CES. So I'm the guests run in like a football team, but we don't quite, roll that way in Vegas. So we do clap. So this is our 5th monthly Startup Grind. If you've never been to a Startup Grind before, it's a global organization headquartered in Silicon Valley. It's now in 50 cities. In fact, next month there will be the second global conference, which if any of you are interested, you can attend. They had about 800 people last year in Mountain View. They have great speakers, head of Intuit, a lot of folks from Google, etc. Great place to meet entrepreneurs. And the 50 chapter has, we get to go for free and spend an extra day networking. So we also are very honored to have, Carol, where are you? There we go, stand up please. With the Startup Grind chapter in Guangzhou, China. Come up here to say hello a little bit about, we're a real global group here.
Yes, my name is Karel van Apeldoorn. I brought the Startup Grind community to China. Currently, we've done 10 events in Guangzhou. Guangzhou is 200 kilometers north of Hong Kong. And the good news is already spreading to Shanghai, Shenzhen, and other places in China. So I was able to attend the first conference in Mountain View last year, and it was spectacular. So I'm excited to go there again next month. So I can highly recommend the event to all of you.
And you have a Twitter handle?
That is Startup Grind GZ.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Okay, for those who are tweeting, I'm at Michael Turpin, T-E-R-P-I-N. And you are?
Liquipel.
At Liquipel and at Liquipel. There we go. So, let's see what else. I guess we'll get started. This again is the very first Startup Grind that we're doing at CES. Next year I'm actually hoping to maybe do it at CES with CES and then have people come here afterwards. But we thought as an experiment we would do it in our home. Is my lovely wife somewhere? I'm sure you all met her when we first. There she is on the other end in the. Let's see, and so this is the 5th Startup Grind, and we're going to be a little abbreviated just because we got started a little late. We got a lot of partying to do. So we're going to have our guests here are the co-founders of Liquipel, Kevin Bacon, not the actor, but he is 6 degrees from somewhere, and Danny McPhail, and give it up for the founders of Liquipel. So how many people here have actually heard of Liquipel before tonight? Raise your hand. Okay, we've been doing our job. Yep. So Liquipel, actually, I chose them because great CES success story. I like to say it's the 5-year success story that became an overnight success story because Gadget Evolution that created Liquipel was actually a 2009 company. A lot of iterations to get to the final product, and then the launch happened January 2012 at CES 2 years ago, and just a big explosion. So let's go back to the early days. How did you two meet, and where did you come up with the idea for Liquipel?
Sure, so just a quick background. Danny and I originally from Salt Lake City, Utah, which is a pretty interesting place for us to come out of, but believe it or not, we knew of each other, we went to high school together, but kind of ran in separate crowds, so we didn't have that initial history of just grabbing each other and going, but knew of one another. I ended up going away to college up at Utah State. Danny ended up down at ASU. And while I was up there, I was introduced to another product that became my first company that I did. And when I went to secure the license for that original product, I happened to be in the Arizona territory, and they said, there's somebody else that's down here squatting on your locations. And I had just gone ahead and got a really large investment, bought all these licenses, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to need to know who that person is because he's not going to be able to basically take care of his obligations. And they said, well, it's this guy named Danny McPhail. And I said, oh, Danny McPhail. And I still happen to have his phone number in my phone. So I called him up and said, Danny, you've been a busy little bee, haven't you? He said, what have you been doing? And I I said, I can't believe, you've been sitting on these locations. And he said, well, he's a pretty secret guy. He says, what locations? And I said, I just bought the licenses to all these. And he said, well, okay, then I guess you can have them. And so anyways, he was kind of always the grassroots guy. I guess I took a little bit more of the corporate approach, but that was the first time that I think we lifted an eyebrow at one another and said, maybe that could be a good business partnership here.
And that was obviously a different product.
It was, yes, but that was actually a product that helped segue us into it.
Okay. So, waterproofing, water safe, obviously it depends how long it's underwater. So for those of you, the 2 or 3 that don't know what Liquipel is, Liquipel, you should explain it.
Sure. So we spill as we go. So liquid repellent is a liquid repellent nanotechnology. No, I'm just kidding. It is though, liquid repellent nanotechnology. It's done in a specialized piece of machinery. Basically, we place your device inside of there, pumps down, create a vacuum, pulls all the air out of the device and the machine. We then inject our formulation, it turns from liquid to a gas. It comes in, swirls all through the chamber until we hit the correct concentration, and then it comes back up to atmosphere, pull the device out, and it's good to go. So basically what this means is you have a device that looks, acts, feels, functions just like a regular device does. It's now been protected against liquid damage.
Or as the PR guy says, you can shower with your iPhone. Or if you drop it in the pool, which is, I recall, something like 80 million people a year drop a phone in the pool or a toilet, and it's toast. And you don't need to protect it for like days. All you have to do is protect it for about a minute or 2. And now the newest technology is up to about, what, 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, it really depends on the complexity of the device that we're treating, the construction of it, because we have the flexibility of working on an aftermarket level. And so there's a few variables that exist there. So we still do market as a preventative coating. We've covered about 90% of the scenarios in which water damage takes place.
Okay. And when you first started out, you were also not quite certain whether you're going to go and market as a product, do it OEM. So take us through that and let Danny talk about that.
Sure.
It's all good.
And what are your roles with the company in terms of other than founders, and what have you settled into in terms of what you think about what keeps you asleep at night and what you think about what keeps you asleep at night?
Sure, so excuse my voice, it's the end of CES, it's pretty much gone. 2 hours of sleep last night. So back to my role at Liquipel is Chief of Product Development. So I'm constantly out. We've been pretty blessed to find biochemists and engineers throughout the world that have helped us create what Liquipel is. I'm not a chemist or an engineer of any sort, but like I said, we've found the right people that has brought Liquipel together. And in my role, I'm constantly creating and developing new products to go with the Liquipel lifestyle brand, because we're not so much a technology as we are a lifestyle brand. With Liquipel, you're able to continue to do your daily activities with your electronic devices. We always said, Kevin and I, that these phones have come such a long ways, why haven't the way that we can use them followed that path? And that's when we created Liquipel.
Danny's the dreamer. This guy right here, he says, well, why can't we do that? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And it's like, well, okay, now you've planted the seed, now we gotta go figure out how to grow it. So that's, I guess, kind of coming into my position. What I do is, currently I'm the COO. We brought on a very experienced CEO to kind of help us grow and mentor us into the correct path for the business. But basically, I fill the holes. One of my favorite things to do is kind of maintain the relationships amongst everybody, whether they're vendors or licensees or employees, and of course, all of our employees are very, very dear to us. And we've been fortunate to,
family.
we're really starting to build this culture where whether it's a licensee from Hong Kong or in Saudi Arabia or whatnot, and just like you saw at dinner the other night, you have this whole group of people that sit down, sharing the same vision, the same goal, and really a common culture.
And full disclosure, we are the PR firm for Liquipel since the very beginning. From my perspective, a PR dream is a company you can actually use as a verb. You can Liquipel something.
Yes, absolutely.
You can Google something, you can Liquipel something. So, and with the 2 hours sleep now, I'll start leaving you alone. So, let's fast forward to deciding that you were ready to launch, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the crowd from really all over the world. and also a lot of Vegas entrepreneurs. And in Vegas, a lot of times the question comes up, you know, when are you ready to launch? I mean, how much time do you spend in development? When do you know you're ready to launch? When do you know you were ready to show this to the market?
I can take this one.
Go ahead.
So when Kevin and I were traveling the world, putting Liquipel together, we returned back to California with some Liquipel devices, and we were originally trying to basically solve the problem with just humidity. A lot of states, just humidity will set off. There's water sensors inside phones. It'll just trigger those, and a lot of people lose their phone to humidity. So that's what we set out to accomplish. We then started to spray devices with mist and water. After it's almost like these steps. So we accomplished the humidity.
These are the developments that are going on through revisions and samples.
Right, and then started to spray, and then our last trip, you asked when we decided, you know, to launch, was, I'll never forget, it was a Jimmy Buffett song, Margaritaville, and I was at my studio, and I fell asleep with my phone in the water. Woke up 6 hours later to Margaritaville.
A real Vegas story, by the way.
And that's when I got really excited and realized that Kevin and I truly did have something that was ready to be brought to market.
And so by that time, you had also met some of the other folks that joined the company on the marketing side and decided to do CES. Were you a little bit tentative about going after such a big platform as the world's biggest consumer trade show, or did you feel you were ready at that point?
I don't think we had any idea really what we were in for. I mean, I told the story, we made it out there in an old Jeep of mine. We basically had a 10 by 20 banner rolled up on the top of it, and you know, all the flyers and everything for the show, and we were in such a rush to get out there. We were speeding doing 90 miles an hour down the road, and as we were going through these bumps, I mean, it was knocking the fender flares off the side of the car, and we had to duct tape back on, and so, but you know, we were just happy to show up. We had no idea what we were getting into. We went upstairs, you guys did a beautiful job at positioning us and bringing everybody over, and the product was a hit. I mean, it just absolutely exploded because people can see the applications. So,
well, the one thing was also that you guys did on your side that really helped a lot was you showed it off in a way that you could understand in a few seconds. So we ended up launching at the Startup Debut media event on Sunday 2 years ago, and then they had a booth, and they kept the positioning and the way that they showed it, where they had a fish tank with, I believe the original one had like a little bit of purple neon.
yeah, I bought that fish tank at Walmart, actually.
That's great. and here's a phone,
Yep.
dunk it in, take it back, it's still playing video.
Yeah, those
People
things,
got that.
They did, certainly, yeah, that and the tissues. It's always been, it's been a little interesting to try and sell nanotechnology to people, and you know, people want products they can look and feel and touch, understand, and it's like, well, you know, this thing's 1,000 times thinner than a human hair, so that's a little bit difficult until you've seen now the $1 million tissues. You know, so you take a regular tissue, treat it with the process, the Liquipel feels just like a tissue does until you introduce it to water, and the water beads right up and rolls right off, and people just got it instantly.
Universal language, you know.
And so now, I know it hasn't been, it's sort of been pre-announced, but not in roll-up plan yet, but you're looking to do clothing with Liquipel.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, we always knew that once we kind of got the door open and got started, there was going to be a lot of opportunity that we would be able to create. And of course, you know, we had a lot of background in mobile electronics. That was kind of our original passion, and we knew that these things were becoming an extension of ourselves. And so that was kind of our personal vendetta, was to take care of that, to get that going. And from there now we're expanding into so many different applications. And yes, the clothing is something that we're extremely excited about rolling out.
And so in the past 2 years, so the first year was really all about getting distribution, and the product ended up really exploding in places like Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
So why international first and domestic later? What was the sort of characteristics of the market that made you do that?
I think the difference was in the strategy that we're playing. So of course, I mean, most of the electronics, they're coming out of Southeast Asia, places like that, and so we had to make sure to at least get our footprint there so we could be known, you know. And from there, we really wanted to continue to to expand out, and we would like to make it available here in the U.S. If it is available, you can mail it in directly to us, but we want to take on the gigantic guys here. We want the carriers and some of these large distributors, and these guys don't move overnight.
Right.
And so that's very.
But without naming names, I mean, you've been in conversations with all the big players who could basically have a pod in the middle of, you name, the Best Buys, the Home Depots, whatever, Walmart's, whatever. But I guess probably the economics here versus in Asia are a little bit different, where you don't have to write such a big check to sort of.
Yeah, and those guys, I mean, we still were in startup phase, and we have minimum guarantees connected to our contracts that we deploy, and it's like, well, if you feel that strongly about that area and you could write a big enough check at that time in our business career, we'd say, okay, off goes the machine to this place, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, something like we have a machine in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Well, it's kind of funny to have, liquor repellent technology out in the middle of the desert, but hey, they wanted it, they were willing to go for it, and so they were willing to help.
Well, we are a desert here, but we do have some giant swimming pools.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think they probably have a few in Saudi Arabia, but certainly do in Dubai. But I remember actually within several months of you launching, being at a conference where I met a CEO of a big mobile company in Hong Kong, and I mentioned that we worked with Liquipel, and he said, "Oh, Liquipel, people are lining up around the block in Hong Kong to get those." Right. So after the initial application, you've also done headsets, and so explain sort of the philosophy of other areas of electronics after the mobile phone, obviously tablets.
Yeah, we focused on cell phones originally because our approach was, if we went directly to a manufacturer and said, hey, buy our technology, integrate this into your products, we knew that they would not be interested in increasing the BOM price of these products. So we started with a cell phone, which every single person has for the most part, to get the brand out there and drive it up to the manufacturing level. And by doing that, everyone that has different businesses, if it's in the government, if it's medical, they approached us and said, well, hey, if you can do this cell phone, can you do these earbuds? Can you do a bionic knee? And that's kind of what led it into other products.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's always looking for a product differentiator, and we could give that to them. I mean, suddenly, and that value-added service where a lot of products were being ground down in the cost and all that. Suddenly, just like now your Jawbone Jam Box, it's a $50 premium to put Liquipel on it, and people are happy to do it because they want to take these places into environments that they usually wouldn't be able to.
Sort of like ruggedized computers, but a lesser charge to make it so.
Sure. And you have the flexibility of applying it to devices that you want to use.
Right.
So rather than going to buy a ruggedized phone, you can have your own.
So this year you also went back to the cell phone, the mobile phone with Smashboard.
Of course.
So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that's really our bread and butter we came back to when Kevin and I, our first business was a protective coating to resist scratches. And through about 6 years of R&D, we've created what we call the thinnest case in the world. So you can basically wrap your phone with an impact protection and change the color of it, and it wraps the entire device. We increase the strength of the Gorilla Glass by 3.5 times. So this is what we call our Liquipel 360 approach, where you're not going to get cracks, stains, scratches, or chips anymore. Cosmetic wear and tears, your phone's going to stay new all the time, as well as water safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's brand extension basically. Right. And we already have, obviously, if somebody's interested in Liquipelling their phone and protecting it from water damage, well, they probably feel the same way about keeping their screens and their phones protected as well.
So how is the product applied? How do you put it on your phone?
And through about 6 years of R&D, we've created what we call the thinnest case in the world. So you can basically wrap your phone with an impact protection and change the color of it, and it wraps the entire device. We increase the strength of Gorilla Glass by 3.5 times. So this is what we call our Liquipel 360 approach, where you're not going to get cracks, stains, scratches, or chips anymore. Cosmetic wear and tears, your phone's going to stay new all the time, as well as water safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's brand extension basically.
Right.
I mean, we already have, obviously, if somebody's interested in repelling their phone and protecting it from water damage, well, they probably feel the same way about keeping their screens and their phones protected as well.
So how is the product applied? How do you put it on your phone?
The skins itself is actually applied, you can do it yourself. We have a special adhesive that you really just have to align it, and it actually just crawls up the screen and starts going on by itself.
Spooky.
Yeah.
And so this one's a little bit different than having to have these $250,000 machines in malls. So what will the distribution for skins be like, and how quickly will we see it all over the place?
Sure, well, being that we're in 18 countries now, we are going to funnel it through our channels, through our licensees throughout the world, who are strategic partners in the AT&Ts of the world. You have Turkcell in Turkey, who has 3,500 doors, those kinds of locations that we can funnel these products through.
And when can we get this in Las Vegas and where?
Right now you can get it on our website. We
Okay.
did launch it at CES on Tuesday, but it is on our website.
But see, so something interesting, I mean, to all the business people in the room, this is part of a startup company making sure to remain agile. So one of the main challenges that we've had to overcome with Liquipel as a technology is that it takes a very expensive piece of machinery to do it, and it's done in a service. So somehow we have to get that device out of your hands and into one of our machines. So this is a product that's complementary to what we're doing, but also is something that a customer can get directly off the shelf or mailed to their house.
And as retailers start seeing those fly off the shelf, they're like, okay, maybe my exposure level of buying, one of these machines or leasing it is a little bit lower. And also, I know you've talked at some points about having, maybe a big mall. You've done it in Canada, actually, where you have a mall. Share a machine between, say, maybe 10 different places, so that the Verizon store, they can treat it, the AT&T store, or the Rogers store, or whatever it is up there.
What's the investment in the machine?
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
It's confidential usually, but I mean, it's sizable. It's not that
I
they're,
mean, for the retailer to put the machine in the store,
it's a sizable investment, and I can tell you that the retailers that you want to work with, they tell you, well, no, you're going to pay to put the machine in my
Yeah,
store,
right.
and then I'll let you know how it goes.
What color is the machine?
It's white. I can say. With a beautiful LCD on it that's got a good little Liquipel splash screen on it, so everybody knows what time it is.
So the last question before I sort of turn it over to questions, and this has obviously been pretty interactive in the living room, would be, so a little over a year ago, as part of going out and raising money, you also got a strategic investment from William Morris, and that got you access to celebrities, and you sort of picked and chose which one you thought would be sort of representative of the brand. Boy, you guys had really good timing, because you ended up
Good choice.
like picking Pharrell Williams just before he took off.
Yes, definitely.
And so last year I remember him being in the booth, and he could literally walk around the booth and people didn't quite know who he was, even though he was a Grammy winner already. And now with Get Lucky and Blurred Lines, I mean, we had a press event in the booth midweek on Wednesday, and it was just like, I thought they were going to have to call the Las Vegas Fire Department. It was like blocking so many aisles, trying to get wedge CNN there, which did a great piece. And, so how has that sort of been to work with a celebrity? I know that obviously having him go to dinner with a lot of your licensees was a big hit, and it obviously helped with the press. How does that sort of work in terms of being a lifestyle brand and uniting all hardware?
Right, well, I mean, first of all, celebrity or not, I mean, Pharrell is probably one of the most humble and down-to-earth people I've ever spent my time with. I mean, he's the kind of guy that comes and thanks the press for filming him. And so it's really a pleasure to work with him. And, he still does pay us a lot better than one of his lines. I mean, he's told us that, you guys don't need me. And it's like, no, what we do. Because, he's a tastemaker, but being a tastemaker, that also means that you need to know, kind of what the latest and greatest things are. And he sees Liquipel's really cool technology, and, he's a dreamer. We like to say, where there's imagination, there's application. And he certainly feels that exact same way and is supportive of having us there. So
Great. So, questions for the Liquipel founders, Danny and Kevin?
I'm a plant, just for disclosure, I work on social medias too. Was there anything, some new development involving, possible involvement Pharrell, and clothing, fabric?
We talked about that a little bit, but I
Did
didn't
you? Oh,
say
okay.
specifically Pharrell.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's he's really good at kind of pushing us in certain directions. You know, he's going, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And as we can allocate resources to it, we certainly want to see, you know, his vision come true, because that, of course, translates to better commercial success for us.
Of course, I keep, you know, they have a 40-foot booth at CES, I guess next to 50 with a waterfall in the middle of it. And I'm always joking that when the clothing line comes out, instead of a wet t-shirt contest, they're going to have a dry t-shirt contest.
Not being from an engineering background in the beginning, but knowing that there are electronics abusers out there, of which I'm one, that this application was absolutely ideal for. How did you know that you could solve that solution? And why another electronics company had not, why do you believe another electronics company had not gone down that avenue to create what is an obvious?
Right. Well, I think, we were just absolutely bound and determined to get where we were going. So those in the room that we've been able to have some conversations with, you know, we've touched just about every person in our space at one time or another. So it was that we were not willing to quit, and we found that, you know, every person that kind of put a roadblock in front of us actually began to motivate us. And really be able to go through and create the process like we did, we ended up with something much stronger in the end than where we started.
And that's Alex Lon, who just asked that question, who is visiting us from Sweden for CES, and he's with KNC Miner, which is the most powerful Bitcoin mining company in the world. And we actually have a KNC Miner Jupiter sitting there on the table mining Bitcoins as we speak. And that is the most powerful Bitcoin mining machine in the world. Does 600 gigahash per second. Who knows, maybe a Bitcoin... 660 now? 660?
50.
650, 650 gigahash, keeps on going up. But the new Neptune will be coming out in Q1, early Q2, and that will be 5 times as fast minimum. It will be 3 terahash per second, and they sold $29 million worth in about a week. And that was the week of Thanksgiving too.
Wow.
So anybody wants to know anything about Bitcoins, Alex will be near the guarding the Jupiter over there. And thank you, Alex, for coming. And any other questions? Yes, in the back.
Denis from New Zealand. Since you're dealing with incredibly small molecular structures down to atom size, is there any bleed off to the human being holding the phone, and thus those chemicals going through their skin transdermally into their body?
So the difference is, there are some questions around nanoparticles, and I guess their interaction with biomass and all those types of things, but that's not the nature of the chemistry that we use. It's just basically with the deposition method, it's more a measurement of the thickness rather than the composition of the materials involved.
So you're getting no molecule by molecule bleed off?
No.
Right.
It actually fuses to the phone.
It becomes part of the surface of the treatment.
Yeah.
Structures down to atom size, is there any bleed off to the human being holding the phone, and thus those chemicals going through their skin transdermally into their body?
So the difference is, there are some questions around nanoparticles, and I guess their interaction with biomass and all those types of things, but that's not the nature of the chemistry that we use. It's just basically with the deposition method, it's more a measurement of the thickness rather than the composition of the materials involved.
So you're getting no molecule by molecule bleed off?
No.
Right.
It actually fuses to the
It becomes part of the surface of the treatment.
Yeah. So yes, Oren.
Being as Apple obviously put moisture sensors into the phones so that they could detect water entry before it actually caused damage and thus void the warranty, now that you're defeating their moisture sensing, has their reaction been to try to find sensors that will defeat your sensor defeating
Yes.
technology,
They
or are
have-
they cooperating?
They have actually introduced some new IP on a new water sensor that we feel is because of Liquipel. And it's actually, what happens is when water does enter a little crevice, it actually sends a signal.
What about the idea of the fact that there's so in demand that people want to buy your company? How are you handling that? What's your plan? Are you planning an exit strategy? Or?
There is a few exit strategies that we see fit. There's some pretty large insurance companies out there that say, you know, if we had Liquipel in these devices and perhaps didn't even co-brand with us, just had the technology in the device itself, what would our return rate be on water damage? They say if we can save 5% of their water damage devices, that their rate of return is just going to be astronomical.
And I think, I mean, any good entrepreneur, anybody looking to start a business, at least one of the things that I think is very useful is to kind of have an ideal exit strategy for yourself, and at least an idea of where you would want to go. For us personally, I think, you know, we'd like to work towards an IPO here, and you know, we have people calling us already, where can I buy Liquipel stock, and we're pushing up our values and really building in the foundation so that when we choose to do so, it's recognized on the correct level.
And you've had a couple of private rounds of really nice valuations too, so.
We have just been blessed in that way.
How do you keep other companies from doing what you do?
Well, we're not the only ones in our space, but it just seems to be that the market is dictating who wants to work with who. And, you know, we'll have customers that approach us, go out, and we're not quite the Ferrari, but we're also, you know, not the Honda Civic as far as pricing and things go. So, you know, one of the very unique things about our company is that we're a brand as well. So it's not just getting a standard PWR or a super hydrophobic coating and things like that. And that consumer awareness really allows us to put a value add on top of the products that we're treating, and that's something that makes the other manufacturers very interested.
And the power of first to market. I mean, that's...
Well, I was going to say, I mean, everyone I asked who knew the name Liquipel, everybody raised their hand. How many people know the name P2I? That's their biggest competitor. So.
The problem is the ingenuity of your idea and the result means that your saturation is less than 1%. There's a huge market that once you show people, once you show big competitors, Liquipel as a brand may not compete. Do you have a licensing strategy? You should want to blanket the world. Let's start Liquipelling little babies.
Yeah, but in some verticals, their value is priceless.
I think they have a brilliant product, but so will other people. How do you keep other
Well, they do
people?
have, Liquipel does have IP. Liquipel does have pretty tight IP. Obviously, other people have different aspects, just like any other thing. It's like whose IP is going to win, and somewhere lawsuits happen, and somewhere market happens.
Yeah,
and you're winning the market.
Yeah, and when you're Apple and Samsung, you consider having to spend, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars running the lawyers for billion-dollar settlements. It makes sense. For us, we have our protection, but it's all about time to marketing and consumer awareness. So we have a lot of faith. We double down on our brand, and we think that's one of the things that differentiates us from anybody else, is that standardized consumer awareness of the technology that we're receiving.
Okay, we started a little bit late, we ran a little bit late, and I think we've got some great food waiting there. And so the startup grind is officially over, and the CES party list is officially begun. Thank you very much.